Condition now. So how come you gotta use crutches on your antenna top line?
Yeah, that's my attitude. Alright, this thing needs to be loaded. You know, I was tired of just limping along piss weakly. You know, when the wind is blowing the right way, you can do very well with Ranger power. So this is a more recent thing. I finished the Brick Ranger. This is the Brick Ranger driving the Tempo 2000 Linear, which I also fixed. So I'm seeing about 125 watts out and all that kind of thing there. I have been listening on and off pretty much all morning long, or late morning, afternoon. Been working on a research project, you know, but that's something else. I'm waiting for Jim WA1UQM to show up, but so good to hear you, Steve. Yeah, that thing sounds good. You know, Joe wanted a piece of Henry LR equipment, and you know, I've got the Heap Shit Cheyenne. Well, now that he has that thing, he probably won't want it anymore. You know, I spent a lot of time getting things more together, like the power supply, which was used, you know, the Collins 516F that they use with the S-Line stuff. That many years ago I got, minus the case, and modified that a bit, solid stated it. And there's the supply for the Cheyenne. And problem being that the B plus voltage is like 850 volts or better. So, you know, you got to make certain considerations, and the low voltage out of it is higher, and so on and so forth. So I put the thing away for, I don't know, quite a number of years. I used it as the exciter for the Blockbuster. So I pulled it out. There, the friggin' phone is ringing. It always effing rings when I'm on the radio, but I'm not going to answer it. I'm tired of being interrupted. So I'll have to see who it is on the caller ID and call them back. But anyway, I don't know if Joe is still interested in the thing, but I used the I finally had kicking around for years the power supply and speaker cabinet for the S-Line, but the thing is, it's ridiculously deep and there's a lot of wasted space in it, so I have one that I shaved down that I use with the S-Line that I've got that has been set up, that I'm going to be decommissioning because the transmitter quit. And I don't have enough room to work on it here, so it has to go into storage for a while until I have a nice place and space. I'll put something else and slot it in its place. I put a thing together for the Spring Near Fest. I put everything aside. I don't want to get out of here unless it's absolutely. The thing is, I flip a switch on the transmitter or whatever, and the power supply comes up. And I said, well, the only way you turn it on and off is to plug the thing in, and then you got to unplug it. Well, that's a kludgy way of doing things. So I was figuring out a number of schemes, and there was something about it that wasn't right. There's a switch on there. I think you mentioned it, Steve, where there's the on-off, that function switch that applies 12 volts to things. Well, I tried using that. I actually built up a small 12-volt supply that's part of the 516F that pulls in a relay to turn things on. Well, it didn't work that well because somehow or other, not having the schematic handy, the 12 volts or the filament voltage got into the supply, or rather got into things, and the relay would sit there and go, and I just said, screw it. I don't have time to frig with this, so I put it up, and Joe was rather annoyed with me, and it's like, well, that's the way it is. I'm not going to go until it's right, so it's sitting up in the building at the top of the hill until I get enough round to it to do it. So I don't know if he's still interested in the thing, and that's the story. So, rainy day here in Scouttown, WA1SOV, and how bad is my FMing on this thing from WA1H-Yammers?
Okay. The Ranger was a different story. He's got that high frequency garbage from their mixer in there, I guess. But it's not too terrible right now. Well, by virtue of the fact that you have the throatless factor with that thing you want to give to Joe, because he doesn't want it. Yeah, piece of work, man. Hey, would you like this? Well, maybe I'll get it to you one of these.
There's a combination of things. I see the buzz on the stove. I have a fan blowing air on me. There's a shack. Little muffin fan sitting on top of the transmitter, pulling what little heat there is for the stability. And so there's all these extraneous noises going on. The linear amplifier. Now I fixed the problem finally with the Orban preamp. I figured it out, so that's not an issue anymore. So the high frequency fuzz is what I would refer to as a channel maintenance device.
You figured it out, but you didn't fix it?
I fixed it. I fixed it.
Oh, okay. Well, what was wrong?
Oh, God. Yeah. I don't want to go into a whole litany and whatever. I eliminated the 3-terminal regulators. I wired the power transformer from 120 to 240. So the unregulated B plus voltages are plus and minus 12 volts. So that's 24 volts total, and there's no reason why it won't work, and it does work. Straw was, alright, one thing I did not really take into consideration is all the chips are socketed. So I took my pick-nose pliers and carefully gripped each and every one, walked it back and forth, almost pulling it out, doing the old in and out, did them all, and you know, because I think that the particular Orban compressor limiter was a product of the middle 70s. I don't think anybody has ever touched the chips in it. So over a period of years, you know, ambient moisture gets in there and things corrode.
Oh, sure, I can imagine that. But I'm still hearing the noise of the mid-range. Wasn't that the problem?
No, nothing to do with the mid-range or anything like that. It's just when the problem happened with the probably ultrasonics in the 3-terminal regulator thing or whatever, you know, it was in that range, but there's no 3-terminal regulators to freak out, and everything is right with the world. Well, if you'd like, I'll unplug the microphonium and see if it goes away. Now the microphonium is plugged in. You probably mean this. Let me get the microphonium. Must be what you're hearing. It's about a 3 1/4 inch or 3 1/2 inch Radio Shack muffin fan, 120 volt fan that's sitting on top of the cabinet of the Ranger. I've got another cabinet, but you know, it's like I got this project like 98% done. The remaining 2% is well, I was running it without the fan, and even though there isn't that much energy being expended after a while, things start to get warm, and there's VFO drift and things like that. So I put the fan on top, and it's just, you know, if you want to hear me, you're going to have to live with it. Yeah, same thing. You know, it's only a few percent. Only a few percent. If I back down on the audio gain of the system, it'll probably reduce. So that's it. Keeping cool. I'm glad to see that this does not have an FM problem. That's a very common issue with the Ranger. And this one, boy, I spent a lot of time making sure that the cabinet, you know, all the hardware, everything is torqued up very tightly. Everything is bonded very tightly, and I think I've done good in that department. You're the only one I can hear. You mean you don't hear Pete or Steve?
You're giving me a sick-ass signal over here.
Jeez. I think the band conditions are semi-long. I think we're on a, I don't know if the sun farted or what. I don't pay attention to what's going on with sun farts or any of that. Got too much else going on here. Yeah, okay. Well, Eric says he doesn't want to have you guys think he's rude because I'm the only one he's hearing. He's not hearing you, Pete, and not hearing Steve either. Los condiciones, Italiano condiciones. Well, could have fooled me. Conditions are up and down. Sometimes you dip down a ways and then you come right back up. So that, poot, is the story. So Steve, how's your summer treating you? KB1 VWC from WA1H-Yammers. That thing has a low end that won't quit. I really enjoyed listening to that thing. But it's that, you know, I just have so damn many projects, and I'm glad you got it because you can take it to the next level, maybe do all the cosmetic work on the cabinet and make the thing look like, as old Buzzer George would say, like $1 million. Or are you pumping it into a linear? Well, you're very Q5, you know, the signal will drop down. It kind of reminds me of the old days when I first ran into you, and I'd use my Ranger, you'd use the Cheyenne, and we'd hear each other, no problem. You know, every evening around 6:30, 7 o'clock here on 30 meters. So, just a very brief description of this transmitter. Or maybe I have described it, but I'm using a power transformer from a Dumont TV set, which is simply massive. I shoehorned in a mod transformer, a CBM2, and it is turbo connected. And you can turbo connect them the right way, so you have like a 1.66 to 1 impedance step down. And due to the very limited space I have, the rectifier tube sockets where the modulator tubes are, and I've been going round and round and round and round trying to figure out what I was going to put in there. I thought of a pair of EL34s. You know, I would have to mill a little bit out of the little bias platform, whatnot. I thought of 5881s. Well, one thing that I came across a number of are the last late-grade audio fool tubes that were put in high fiddle-dee-dee amplifiers, stereo, whatever. 7591, size of a 6V6, very high transconductance, and that's what I'm using. And I basically followed along a lot with the RCA receiving tube manual phase inversion scheme. See, they use a 7199. That's an audio fool tube. They're made of unobtainium. And the thing is, the triode section is medium mu on the low end of the scale, and that's what I understand for phase inverter work. What you want, you don't want to use a high mu triode in that case. And if you look at other triode pento 9-pin tubes, most of them have an amplification factor of 40 if it's listed as a medium mu. But I did a lot of searching and digging and searching and digging, and finally I found a tube that electrically is pretty much equivalent, and that's the 6BA8, different pinout, but the amplification factor, the low mu of the triode is like 17, which is about what the 7199 is, and the pentode section is, you know, pretty high gain and transconductance like that is 7199. So that's what I'm using. Screw these audio fools and their prices. You know, I would shudder to think what I would have to do if I had to replace the 7591s, but I have a number of them anyway that are like engineering samples, new, unused, and only running about 350 volts at best on things, so I don't think they're going to die anytime soon. So looking at this thing on the scope, the modulation looks real effective, and I did a lot of painstaking work to make the response flat. I've got a loop of it, and that is, as the audio fools call it, global feedback from the modulated DC out of the mod transformer from the turbo connect going all the way back to the cathode of the 6BA8. And, you know, I had to do a little bit of frequency contouring, but, oh, poop. The response is very, very flat to about 7 or 8 kilohertz. And then it starts looking kind of ugly. The low end is very clean down to 30 hertz, and it actually is very good down to 20 hertz. That's the brick Ranger. I imagined, you know what I got to do is take an empty Ranger cabinet, put a bunch of bricks in it, and put it on the scale and see what we got. This one is taking the place of the Cider class Ranger, which took a trip up to the bunker, where it'll be used for my Junction. This is strictly Cider class to drive an amplifier or use as a standalone 20-watt piss weaker. And that's the name of that tune. Many details, but I'm sure a number of other people have heard me go on and on and on and on and on and on, but I think I've achieved something that may become a standard for Henry LR audio. Aside from the extraneous blower noises and all that, and fan noises. And that's the story, Steve. Anyway, Pete, hope you're hearing me all right. Conditions are up and down. And that's the story. I'm glad to hear you got your stacked dipoles up and running again. WA1SOV from WA1H-Yammers.
fun thing, and when it's done, it'll be a magnificent radio. 3 feet wide and 18 inches tall and a foot deep or something like this. Is one massive table radio, that's for sure.
That's why I got it. I saw that thing. It's like, I want a table radio, and that is it. But made into a table radio package. Yeah, sometimes you dip down and now you're riding the crest of the new wave. Well, I guess you guys lost commo. Steve, were you hearing Pete? Yeah, I guess he's got to jump start his oscillator. Or it depends on the crapstal. It could be any number of things. I don't know if it's an HC6U type or POOT, an FT243. Well, 7275 is a common frequency for the FT243s. I've run into these problems where you got to open the crystal up, the crystal holder, and you take the crapstal and you get some, good rubbing alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and put it between your fingers and work it around a little bit. And be in the kitchen, or better yet, the bathroom sink, running hot water, and making sure you massage things, making sure that you have a strainer, so if you drop the crapstal, it doesn't go down the drain. And then have some unscented toilet paper or paper towel with which to put the soaking wet crapstal in, dry it off, pop it back in the holder, and chances are you'll be off to the races. That'll restore the activity of it.
And I'm sticking with the coil. And I suppose I should read the book as to where Heath tells you to set it. But, Timmy, it's more fun to just stick with it.
Stand by, Steve. Yeah, he's probably busy with something. All right, Pete. All right, and Steve, what were you saying? You're dinking around with the oscillator coil for the Crapsnell oscillator?
Yeah, correct. It doesn't want to start every time, so I was playing with the coil because, of course, it was working okay till I put the bottom back on it to me, and now it's not working, so figured I just detuned it a little bit, but maybe the socket also needs to get all cleaned up as well, because I didn't give it the usual VWC going through. I assumed that everything was kind of okay. I cannot hear Pete at all. He has disappeared off the face of the planet.
Well, he's back. Yeah. Pete, Steve says that you have disappeared, so the band is beginning to go. Well, I'm further away. Oh yeah, you know, you've been very solid in here, Eric.
Well, I'm using a crutch too, so this is not correct on propagation.
Yeah, where's the crutch located? All right, I kind of figured a lot of people use his crutch. And I think, what would happen if Carmine said the hell with it and pulled the plug on it? Yeah, well, he's got one of the best crutches around.
Mine is still active as well. It's just not listed on the Kiwi site anymore.
Ah, okay. Anyway, just some totally unrelated notes and things. Looking around for Jim UQM. Well, Jim built up homebrew transmitter, single 813. I think it's just a single band around 75, pair of 810 modulators, and that's what he uses. But it's always sounded dull. I mean, the high end is just not really there. And Nick gave him a Neumann condenser microphonium, you know, one of those. I forget, but it's a much sought after microphonium. He's got a DBS-286 with a phantom power, and to bring up to 9. So now he's up at line 11. And when he goes into this Yorkville PA thing, there's some kind of an ass and backwards transformer to drive the grids of the 810s. The power supply he's using, from how he describes it, the tube is in there, that's the rectifier, so it's probably heavily bled. So I don't know what the regulation is like. And the other thing is in the beginning, like many years ago, he's using a Thorderson T11M77 Wurlitzer jukebox style 300 watt mod transformer, which is plenty sufficient. But you know, I've always been a proponent of having an impedance match between the modulator and the PA, where if you have, like, you know, a pair of 810s, you can easily, with 1500 volts, which is supply voltage, plate voltage is, you can easily get a good 500 watts of audio if you crack the whip on them. They'll do it. So, you know, being that the 810s have twice the filament current of 811s, you can pretty much be assured that they're good for about twice the peak emission, therefore roughly twice the amount of audio output capability. So, you know, so I told him with the CHT series transformer, use entire primary to entire secondary. It'd be a mild step down and have a really good match for the 810s, which it does. But as I found out when playing around with those things, that looking into lower impedances, the high-end tanks. So I have several of those transformers, and I think I took one, and I forgot that I had done it. I was experimenting with turbo connecting, doing audio, work table, not bench racing, but work table racing with the audio oscillator and terminating things with various value resistors and yada, 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 and using the Simpleton 260 for the VU meter scale in the 2.5 volt mode, which is 5,000 ohms per volt, which puts a 12.5K load impedance across whatever transformer you're checking out. So, I didn't write down anything. I just did a fair amount of experimenting, as I have a vague recollection that I did. I knew I had several of them, so I went up to the bunker this morning in the pissing rain, put the raincoat on, went in there, and there on the floor was one of those CHT transformers. So I grabbed it and looked at it and said, geez, this thing's all been turbo connected and marked and all that with paint ink markers as to what to do. So I brought it down, put it here, broke out the audio oscillator and all the stuff and started dinking around with it. And I checked the ratio. Rather than using the high impedance winding to the lower impedance winding, I used the lower impedance winding and paralleled up the secondary, which is split, and then went to one of the taps on what I designated as the primary. And I got the exact same impedance ratio as is when used, the higher impedance winding for one side and the lower impedance configuration for the modulated stage. It was identical. But when I swept it, the high end was far better. I mean, if you used a bit of, you factor in the bypass cap at the bottom of the RF choke and the plate blocking cap, say with 2,000 puff shunt across roughly 6.5 or 7K total worth of resistance, the high end went right up there to about 7 or 8 kilohertz, and then it dropped off pretty rapidly. Without the capacitive shunt, it made it to about 5 and then rolled off fairly rapidly. Far better. So then for shits and grins, I configured it as according to the book. Full primary to full secondary, the higher impedance side. And it was good to about 2.5 kilohertz, and then it started dropping like a rock. So, with turbo connecting, you can do it two ways. As you do, you parallel up one set of windings, and you take one side of that paralleled combo and tie it to a tap, in this case, on the primary side, so that, it's phase additive. And you can try it either tap A on one side of the primary or tap B, where you flip things around to do the same thing. And I found out with the UTC CVM series, that makes a big difference. Well, I tried that with a CHT transformer, and there was this huge peak around 9 or 10, 12 kilohertz that was quite a few dB more and flat. So I tried working it into like a 3500 ohm load impedance, and that would not damp it down. So that tells me that there's, winding capacitance issue, that if it were even used that way, you'd probably break something down. So Marcy took a photo of it and emailed it. And so 75 in the morning. Jim generally gets on around 8 o'clock. So does Bear GCR. And then when I told Jim that, well, he sounds a little dull, giving a constructive criticism, I was trying to get him to tweak up the high on the DBX processor, or whatever you want to call it, which he did. But then he put it back to the way it was, because Bear told him, oh, it sounds great. No, it doesn't sound great. So, it's like the hung jury kind of thing. And then he got a recording that Eric CAU did in full bandwidth and emailed that to Jim, and Jim listened to it, and Jim told me, yeah, it does sound dull. So I told him last night, we were hearing 40 meters for quite a while. Nobody broke in. We had the frequency all to ourselves. And I told him about turbo connecting, and I might have a much better way of doing it. All you got is change the taps around and you're done. So I spent a good part of the morning validating my research, and I wrote down all the results. So, there's ways around situations that are not in the books. As you know, Steve, not in the books. So, took a snap photo of the thing. So I got to explain to Jim so that he can do it quickly and easily, and that'll bring back some of the highs. But then again, we were talking about an appropriate audio driver for his 810s, possibly building up the cathode follower scheme that Gates used with 807 audio voltage amps and 807 cathode followers directly driving the 833 grids. But 810s, all an 810 is electrically, it's half an 833. In fact, at one time in the Gates catalog, they had a 250 watt BC1T that had 810s in it instead of 833s, because back then the PC was very fussy. You could not install a higher power transmitter other than what you were licensed for, rather than get a higher power transmitter and backing it down. They would not go along with that. So So Gates was into selling transmitters. Like, okay, so you get this 250 watt pared down, BC1T, the filament voltages, everything is the same. It's just they had a kit that you could put the 833 mounts in there and convert the transmitter over to a kilowatt. That's what they offered. So, that being said, it would not be a huge deal. You don't have to use 807s, You can use 6L6s if you really wanted to, or more common tubes like that. SX62, and sure enough, there's a certain amount of grunge. And the other, so then I pulled one of the 7591s out. And I was only seeing 25 mils in idle. Now I set the idle for about 80 mils. I plugged the tube that I pulled back in, and unplugged the tube that indicated 25 mils, and I was seeing about 50 or so mils of oil. I think are up in storage, not down here. And there were a few that I dug out, and I found a pair that came to Harriet, design engineer from Macintosh. I think maybe he had these tubes made up or labeled for maybe a future one. So that's the story. So I rustled those up, plugged them in the socket. Each one was perfectly balanced. And that's the story. I'll be back in about 3 or 4 minutes, Steve, if you're feeling like hanging out. This is WA1H-Yammers. All right, well, you're still Q5. You're dropped off a bit. I'm going to get out of here. We'll see you later. This is WA1H-Yammers. Oh, yeah, audio foolery at its best.
Joe. I told him straight up.
Now I'd put you in the fucking ground.